Hi everyone, this is John Mandrola from the heart.org Medscape Cardiology, and I'm here at the European Society of Cardiology meeting, and I am super excited to have the investigators of the FRAIL-AF study. FRAIL-AF is a really neat trial. I just really learned about it at the meeting. This is a trial looking at withdrawal, vitamin K antagonist, that's warfarin mostly for US doctors, and withdrawal of the VKA antagonist to DOACs, and looking at a primary endpoint of major bleeding. And this is in frail patients, not typical trial patients. So I'm very excited to have our two trialists. They are very Dutch from the Utrecht University, and I'm not going to mess up their pronunciation, so they're going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Linda Joosten. I'm a PhD student and a medical doctor at Utrecht University in the Netherlands.
Yes, so my name is Geert-Jan Geersing. I'm a GP and associate professor at the Utrecht University.
Okay, Linda, first author, a big presentation in the big main auditorium. Tell us what the results were of the trial for FRAIL-AF.
Yeah, the main results, they were very surprising and also unexpected to us. The FRAIL-AF study was designed as a superiority trial with the hypothesis that switching from a VKA to a NOAC would lead to less bleeding. However, we saw the opposite, and that's also why the Independent Data Safety Monitoring Board advised to stop the inclusion of patients. Because we saw that switching from a VKA to a NOAC leads to more bleeding with a hazard ratio of 1.69 and a highly significant p-value of 0.001, which means that switching from a VKA to a NOAC compared to continuing with a VKA in frail older patients is clearly contraindicated.
This is really surprising because you designed a trial to show superiority of DOACs for less bleeding, and you found the opposite.
Yeah.
Now, did the increase in bleeding occur because of switching? Because I know that in my clinic, it's kind of hard to switch. Was it early on?
No, actually it was not. So we saw that if you look at the cumulative incidence curve, you can see that the curves separate actually later on in the trial. So the switching itself, that all went well. We were really on top of this, so we really were really stringent in how to switch, and this actually went all well, but the curves, they separate later on in the study. So it's not the switching, it is later on in follow-up.
One of the reasons why I was drawn to this trial is because so many of my patients are frail older adults, or they have multimorbidities, and I'm thinking when I'm seeing these patients in my clinic that this isn't like these patients that are in the trials. And so you enrolled kind of special patients, I think.
Yeah, we enrolled frail older patients, and we found them with the Groninger Frailty Indicator questionnaire, which is a validated questionnaire and assesses frailty on several domains, such as mobility, cognition, and also the psychosocial domain. And those were really frail older patients with loss of mobility, hearing loss.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the frailty index, Groningen index scale of 4, say. What does that look like for a patient?
Yeah, so they're all old, so they're typically above the age of 80 years. They would all have polypharmacy, but that's not the only defining item. They will all have multimorbidity. So, but the distinction between our trial patients and what was included in the previous trials is that these patients have problems on multiple other domains. So it's cognition, it's being independent of others, so it's unable to walk within their own houses without help. So these type of patients were included in our trial. So, and this was really, we started this trial basically out of frustration also, because these patients are never included in trials because they are either excluded because they are at high risk of bleeding, so we don't want them to be in trials, or they are also protected by their own physician to not go into a scientific study because it's too burdensome, it's too difficult for you to enter these studies. And then what we do in guidelines is we say, yeah, we don't have evidence for frail elderly, but we don't have evidence that drugs work differently in these patients. And then what we say is, because we don't have the evidence, because we never study it, then we just say, well, it's going to be the same. Why so why bother? And I was so frustrated about this because I was thinking, this is simply not true. You cannot just extrapolate findings from studies that were done, which are really good trials, by the way, so nothing against the NOAC trials. And indeed, if you are non-frail older patients, probably a NOAC would be better for you. But that doesn't mean that it's the same for a frail older patient. Actually, and we found out it's the opposite.
One of the criticisms, or not criticisms, but one of the factors that I've heard is that, well, the Netherlands has amazing INR management, and if this was done somewhere else where the INR management wasn't as good, then maybe this wouldn't have been the finding. So was INR management so good in the Netherlands? Is it, tell me the story.
Yeah. We don't have TTR levels for individual patients, but we looked at TTR levels of frail patients who are visited at home at the Dutch thrombosis services that included our patients, and there we saw that TTR levels were around 65%. And that's comparable, for example, with patients included in the Aristotle trial, where TTR levels in the Netherlands were also around 65%, and those TTR levels were similar to countries like Canada, USA, UK, Germany.
So it's good, but it's not any better than the trials?
No, I don't think so. And indeed, you can still argue if you have a patient with a low TTR level, then maybe it's still worthwhile to switch. We're going to look at it probably in the future, but we don't have the data yet available. But it's important to know that these were patients that were on stable VKA management. But this is the domain of the study. So these were frail, older patients who were likely on stable VKA management, TTR around 65%. That's good, but it's not perfect. Actually, the countries where TTR levels are even higher are Norwegian countries, Finland, Denmark. They are really good at INR management. We are pretty okay at it, but we're not that much better as you guys in the USA do it. So I don't think that's going to be a big difference in our trial.
I mean, a 69% increase in bleeding is, I mean, what do you think of that? When you saw that, what did you think?
Yeah, we were very surprised. We didn't expect that.
No. Yeah. So yes, indeed. So we were. When you first see the data, your first reaction is, "Yeah, I don't believe this. There's going to be something. Why is this happening?" But then, when the lines they separate even more and more and more, and then the Data Safety Monitoring Board they say, "We need to stop the trial now because the difference is too big to just be a coincidence." And also, it's a randomized design, so the patients were the same when they were randomized. So, but yeah, this was the reason why we started the trial, because we were uncertain. We were expecting to see a benefit for NOAC treatment, but of course we were uncertain about this, and this is why we started the trial.
I suspect you probably had colleagues telling you that it would be better to switch, because this is a general feeling. Yeah. This is the general feeling that at least we have in our community, that DOACs are going to be safer, less bleeding, because they were in the trials. But I think what you've shown is that it's not the same.
No. Exactly. And also, if you do look at the trials more in detail, the previous DOAC trials, there you can see that the benefits of DOACs were the strongest in the younger patients who were VKA naive when they entered the trial. So in that sense, maybe it was not that unexpected, because the DOAC trials already learned us that the benefits of NOACs are probably biggest in younger patients without polypharmacy, without multimorbidity, who were VKA naive. And I think still for those patients, a DOAC treatment is a really good option, probably safer than VKAs. At least the trials showed that they were safer than VKAs. But the patients that we included in our trial, they were not included in the DOAC trials. It's 10 years older, it's frailty, it's multimorbidity, it's all these things together. Yeah.
How do you feel that your findings, does it inform the decision of what anticoagulant to start? Initially de novo in a patient who is frail with multimorbidity? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think it is always good to stick to the facts, and this is not what we studied. So this was a switching trial. So it's also really good for our colleagues around the world that our trial learned evidence from patients who are on VKA management, and the question was, do we need to switch them, yes or no? So we didn't include new patients in this trial. I think it's really tempting to think about this. And I think the most tempting thing is that we need to do more trials in these patients. Also with the novel Factor XI inhibitors that will enter the market, these newer drugs, they need to be studied upfront in frail elderly patients, not 10 years later. That's too late. And so it's we need to do that early on. So, and I think we need to do more studies in this population. I think this is what our study really learned us to do. We don't know for sure that it's the same.
I cannot agree more, because this is exactly what we need, is to study these things. And we have a minute or two left, and I want to ask you, how do you accomplish this thing? Because a lot of times I say we should study this, and they're like, well, it's not so easy to study this, but you all did it. I mean, you all figured out how to do this in all of these outpatient centers to study this. Tell us how that came about.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's hard work, but it's just working as a team together. That's to start with. I think we had a really good team with Linda, with research nurses, with a lot of colleagues, a lot of help from many people, from medical students. So it was really a lot of hard work, but it was also fun. So I think we never had any dull moments with FRAIL. Part of the study was actually run during COVID time, so we had to lock down our study also during a period of time. But I think the most important thing is to keep your goal in mind, think about the fun part as well, and just work together as a team. I think that's what made us get to the results where we are today.
Excellent. I mean, I think I really am happy to speak with you, and I'm so grateful for this trial. I think it's one of the most important trials from this meeting, and congratulations on doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.